This is the Misdirected Mark Podcast, a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, our listeners. We are explicit, you have been warned, and I'd like to thank Mike Willard for letting us use his music on our show. Now let's pick up those mics and get on with this thing.
Okay, well, I have floor plans downloaded already. I was planning to print them out in blueprint scale, so we got a nice big view of everything.
I've got some silicone spray to cloud the cameras and some nitric acid to corrode the locks.
All right, I put in some calls for a getaway driver.
Hey. Ooh, what shenanigans are you two involved with this time?
We need to get a month's supply of beverages, just in case the pandemic lasts much longer.
You know, it's a heist, like that TV show. I'm thinking of calling it Coffee Break. You want in?
Well, it's an awesome code name. I do like a good heist, but I don't know. Are you guys over planning this? Like, this looks like a lot of stuff.
Damn. All right. But I was all set with this map of the nearby Tim Hortons locations. We were going to tattoo it on Bob's body.
Weird. Although I loved Prison Break, but weird nonetheless. And also, why do you two have nitric acid in here?
And with that, welcome to episode 402 of the Misdirected Mark Podcast. This week, Phil, Jerry, and I are exploring planning within your RPGs. But first, his name's Phil.
His name is Jerry.
And he is Old Man Logan.
That's only going to mess people up later. All right, before I can admit us formally into the house of Misdirected, let us do our temperature check, even though we know for medical purposes, by the time temperature check fails, we'll all be screwed. But nevertheless, physically and mentally, how you doing, Bob?
I'm all right. I've been rocking a headache today. I had a few moments of doom scrolling earlier in the afternoon where I had a couple of tiny moments of existential dread, you know, but then I was like, no, stop that. Put the phone down for a while.
Doom scrolling will do that to you.
Doom scrolling will do that to you. But generally, I'm not bad. My headache, I'm almost positive, is attributed to my neck issues my chronic neck issues that I've got going on. So I've been just trying to stretch and do some of the exercises and whatnot to get things loosened up. But it's just been chronic all day today, and it's like all along the side of my eye here. And it's that annoying one where it's like, so I took a couple of naps and stuff, but other than that, still sane, still hanging in there. Getting by.
All righty, Jerry. Physical and mental health check. How you doing?
Physical, pretty good. Actually, I went in for my physical, and I'm down about 5 pounds.
Hey, all right.
It's working. Mentally, this has been a rough 2 days. We've got a couple people out at work, including basically my main assistant, my sales manager. So there's been a lot of stuff that had to be done last minute. And so basically Monday started out with me doing all the stuff that I had lined up to start on Monday, plus all the stuff he had lined up to start on Monday, plus I had to do some forklift training. So I feel like I'm behind by a half day for the last 2 days. So it's been a little stressful. Getting things done, though. I've got a good support staff, and everybody else has jumped in to kind of pick up some things and take over. We still have our new employee that we're starting to train, so some people stepped in. Like, yeah, I'll take him, I'll teach him this, or I'll do him that. So this would be a lot more stressful at work if I didn't have good people working with me. And of course, then I come home and Lily's been just amazing. So, but that, and I've just been kind of getting through it. So by Thursday, things will be even again, and I'll be on my way. But I also found out that my trip that I was looking forward to get more Legionella training is going to probably be, well, it's definitely I'm not going because our illustrious governor decided that Illinois is a place we can't go. And I trust his viewpoint on this, so I'm not going. So, He's got smarter people than me looking at this, so I'm going to trust on that. Trust the science.
Yeah, I hear that.
How about you, Phil?
I myself am doing okay. I will say, I have to say really quick, because it's now in the forefront of my mind. When we get to the after show, I have to ask about this forklift training thing. Is it just restricted to your employees, or like, can any of us get forklift training? Don't answer now. We'll save it for the after show. just intensely curious about this. Anyway, I myself, physically, I'm fine. Mentally, I'm actually pretty good too. I'll talk about it a little more when we get to the community corner, but I went to my parents' house for a couple days down in Connecticut, which is like, one of the handful of free states that we New Yorkers are allowed to travel to.
Free state of Connecticut.
Yeah, the free state of Connecticut.
The Cuomo free states. So
yeah, I don't know. So it's a mixed bag. I'll talk about it when we get to the conversation corner. But nevertheless, I wasn't working, so I mean that never hurts. So yeah, I'm all right. Today was my first day back at work, and I think I managed the day just fine. Like I got through it actually with a couple wins and a couple big meetings. So yeah, I'm going to put myself as 2 thumbs up, physical and mental. Cool. All right. So one thing. Let's do a quick one thing about us. I guess I'll start because I just moseyed into it. I'll kick it back to one of you guys. My big thing is I finished Deep Space Nine. I have now watched all the episodes. I absolutely loved it. I loved the early ones better than I thought I was going to. I mean, I've always been partial to the season 4 and beyond. But actually watching the first 3 seasons, I was like, you know what? Seasons are just fine. Like there's like 1 or 2 really terrible episodes in the early DS9s, but if you skip over them, like the rest of them are pretty solid, right? So I started Voyager today. I watched the first episode, Caretaker 1 and 2, and I'm watching it with an open mind. Right, I didn't like it back in the day because I was so in love with Deep Space Nine that it clouded my love for Voyager. But now I'm coming at it with a wide open view, and the first episode's pretty solid. I mean, I don't know if I would have picked the solution that Janeway picked, but it was necessary to get into the show, which is not to let the caretaker send them home. Well, not to figure out how to make the thing send them home and instead destroy the array to protect the Ocampan people. Anyway, not to get too much into it, but I get why, like sometimes, I guess this is the thing, right? Sometimes you just got to acknowledge like, hey, the writers have got to get to this point by the end of the episode. And so they did. But character wise, there's like 1 or 2 cringy moments in it with Tom Paris. But other than that, I was like, okay, like this is Trek. Like I'm feeling the Trek here. So I'm gonna just gonna keep rolling with Voyager and do my full watch through of Voyager because I have never watched Voyager from. I've never watched all the episodes of Voyager. So I'm looking forward to getting that underway. Jerry, I'm going to kick it to you because I know Bob has a one thing. So in case you don't, you can pass to Bob and be safe.
Pretty much.
Jerry, what's your one thing?
Just my one thing. I think catching up on Stargirl. It's been a good show. I've talked about it a couple times now. It is what I want out of a superhero show. Good characters, good plot that's not too heavy, and good superhero on supervillain action just about damn near every episode. They don't shy away from, hey, these are people with superpowers and we're going to show them. Even if the special effects aren't amazing, don't give a damn. Give me my goddamn superheroes. Don't Jessica Jones season 2 on me. That's all I gotta say. But a good series. I like it. It moves. So, Bob?
I've been on a slow kick of organization and decluttering. I have a small space that I live in. Most of my life is in this room where I am recording this. This is where I work. This is where I sleep. Everything happens in this room except for when I go out into the kitchen to make food, or if I use the bathroom, which is like 2 feet outside the door. So it's a small area that I contain myself in. So space is at a premium, and I keep bringing new stuff in, buying new board games or whatever. And every time I add another piece, I'm like, space is dwindling. So I've got a thing on the way to help organize some more stuff in my room. I just ordered a Lazy Susan in the cabinet for all my spices in the kitchen cabinet in the pantry. So I've been working on doing organization and decluttering. I don't like clutter. Unfortunately, I've lived with clutter a lot in my 53 years. But I don't really like it. So If I can take an opportunity to do something about that, I usually do.
I'm ready to introduce you to a place called the Container Store.
Yes, the Container Store. I've heard many things about the Container Store, and one day,
my second love, the Container Store. Oh yeah. No, they have it online. You can go online and order stuff. Oh, it's lovely. It's a little expensive.
Yeah, I'm not walking into an actual store unless it's absolutely necessary right now.
No, I'm with you.
You don't know what you're up against.
I will say pre-COVID that I never had a more peaceful time than walking through the Container Store. Like, it's so orderly that like my whole body like visibly relaxed. I was like, oh, this place is amazing.
It's a very zen place.
Very zen. All right. Moving on to some announcements. The TNG Watch Party, the party that does not stop. It will be heading into week 9 at full warp speed. We are still in season 6, right? Like this is now like we're getting down towards the end, right? We've got the rest of season 6 and then 7. So this week we're at the last third of season 6. And then next week, our watch party will be the cliffhanger that is the season 6-7. And then we've got, I think, 2 weeks of season 7 before we say goodbye to TNG.
Quick question on that.
Yes.
Are you planning on finishing season 7 with a watch party?
Oh, how could I not?
Okay. I was hoping that was going to be the answer to the question.
Right. The last week is only the watch party.
Yep.
Right. The last week is just the 2-parter watch party. So yes, we'll so we're gonna watch. So we've got like 2 weeks of season 7, and then like the third week is just the watch party for the finale. And then we'll probably either right away or take a week off or whatever. But then we're gonna just jump right into DS9. And then I'm going to work on Voyager, right? So anyway, Watch Party Week 9 is going on. We've got a Watch Party live tonight for those night owls on the East Coast, and for the rest of you guys elsewhere in the country at much more reasonable times. But yeah, we'll be doing 2 episodes tonight. Oh, we're doing a 2-parter tonight. I'm sorry, we're doing a 2-parter. And this will be our first look at Deep Space Nine. This 2-parter is a crossover episode with Deep Space Nine. So we'll get our first peek at some of the characters from DS9, which is part of the reason why we're going to watch this episode. So anyway, that's going on. If you'd like to join, you can always go to the forums, jump right in. If you're holding out for the Deep Space Nine watch party, then just keep listening, because we'll definitely we'll be talking about it as we gear up to do Deep Space Nine.
Cool.
And I'm looking forward to that too. This Star Trek thing's been a lot of fun. As I said, I only saw about a dozen of the original episodes. It's been so into our culture that only seeing a couple of episodes, you can understand most of what's going on. But it's been nice to see so many really good episodes and to see so much character growth in characters that I was not expecting to be as strong, because if most of your exposure is season 1, a lot of the characters become much, much better as the season goes on. They're not bad characters to start out with, but they get really good episodes as things go on.
Yeah, so, I mean, you come out of Encounter at Farpoint and you're like, Counselor Troy is just
Yep.
And by the time you get into season 6, Counselor Troy's got some good stuff.
I mean, it could be worse. You could be coming out of Encounter at Farpoint being like, Tasha Yar is my favorite character.
That's spoilers. No.
Womp, womp.
I don't think anybody thought that. That's okay.
No, I thought
she was good.
I will say
good,
this,
but I don't think she was. There were other stronger characters in the show.
I will say this: if Denise Crosby had not left the show and had made it to and Tasha Yar made it to season 5, I think Tasha Yar would be a pretty kick-ass character. I'm think
sure
that by the time
developed her well,
I think by the time the season 5 writing team and just having all that experience, I think she'd have been a pretty awesome character.
No, I just meant that considering the other characters they introduced in episode 1, there were just so many other really good runaway characters just in that opening episode.
Oh, they definitely threw all the potential. I mean, they definitely put potential out there, right? Like when you like every character winds up It's really funny because, not to diverge too far, but based on Encounter at Farpoint, Picard is my least favorite character coming out of, like, Riker's cool, Troy's cool, Data's awesome.
Yeah.
And then Picard's like, well, this guy's stodgy and he doesn't like kids. And the writers get much better at writing Picard, as well as giving Patrick Stewart the space to do what Patrick Stewart does best, right? Like, so Picard, like the Picard episodes shoot like through the roof, right? Like there's so many good Picard episodes.
Yes.
But he was not my favorite coming out of Encounter Farpoint. I really liked Tasha better. Plus, for what is that, 1986? Yeah.
Female security officer?
A woman head of security on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was like, right on. Like that's like good stuff. And she was badass too.
Yep.
Like, so cool. All right. Anyway,
All right.
TNG.
Yeah.
We love it. And but we can't talk about that. We're not the TNG podcast. We are.
Nope.
We are a podcast about gaming, game mastering, and entertaining you, which is exactly what we're going to do. And I believe, let me take a sip of water,
Yes.
prepare my vocal cords, and cue me up when you're ready, Mr. Everson. Workshop, plan it out, make a plan, stick to the plan, have contingencies, mitigate your risks, make a plan, get it done. Workshop.
Don't
suck. Well, hello there.
Oh, I gotta love that. That is the workshop.
That is our workshop. All right. Tonight, we're going to start talking about planning in role-playing games. And we don't mean planning your role-playing games themselves, not doing the prep. But when the character is in your role-playing game, try to make a plan or a scheme or shenanigans to do something else. And this topic came up while we were recording last week.
This is pretty much how every topic comes up.
Eventually.
Yeah.
So this is not the first time we've actually talked about planning. For you lifers that have been listening to the show, we did this topic back in episode 173 in 2015. Good Lord.
That's early post Bob.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, I think the show notes say "and Bob," like for hosts. So yeah, we did this back in 173, which means we have done it. It has been a long time since we hit this topic. So technically, this topic is a redux, meaning we're coming back. We're going to take an updated look, which I think is awesome doing these topics with a redux because we know so much more now than we did then.
Mm-hmm. So, back in 2015, did you have a definition for planning?
Oh man, we have a definition, right? Like we always have a definition.
All right then, let's start this off with this definition.
Yeah, that means I get to click this button.
Behold, you are in the presence of Definition Panda.
Yeah, buddy.
All right. So I'm going to start us off with the definition of a plan in general, right? Our dictionary definition of a plan, right? Detailed proposal for doing or achieving something. I like it, right? So therefore, planning is just the act of making a plan, right? But in RPGs, we can give a little more of a definition for planning, right? Planning is a player-oriented activity where the players devise a strategy to address a complex problem within the game. Often the GM is only involved in as much to answer additional questions from the players. I think that's pretty straightforward. So let me put on my project manager hat for a moment, as I am a professional project manager. And let me talk about what planning gets us in the real world, right? So planning really does two things. One, it creates an ordered list of tasks of what needs to be done and by whom in a sequenced order in order to solve this complex problem or task, right? So, Bob's going to do A, then Jerry's going to do B. While Jerry's doing B, Phil can do C, and then all three of us will get together and we'll do D, right? Like that's the ordered plan, right? And that's great because that's how you tackle things that are really complex or large is you do essentially what's called eating the elephant, right? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. But the other thing that planning does is it looks to minimize risk by addressing potential problems and doing one or two things with problems, right? So we can either mitigate a problem, which is we can take a known risk and we can do stuff to make it less likely to occur, right? So for instance, a risk if we were moving something large from one place to another would be that we run out of gas, right? But we'll mitigate that because Jerry's going to take the van to the gas station before he arrives at Bob's place, right? Now the chance that we're going to run out of gas is pretty low because Jerry's going to fill the tank up, right? So that's mitigation. We're going to lower the chance of something happening. The other one is what's called a contingency, which is we're going to have a little mini plan for what to do when something undesirable happens. So now our contingency might be, cool, we're going to move this stuff from Bob's place over to Phil's place. If we get a flat tire, we'll call AAA, right? That's our contingency, right? It's not that we're calling AAA now. It's not like we're lining up AAA, but we just know that if this happens, if A happens, then we'll do B, right? That's a contingency.
Always have a plan.
Exactly.
All right. So now we talked about what a plan is. We need to know, what is planning supposed to do when we're in a role-playing game? Planning a role-playing game is going to start by doing the same things we want it to do in a real world. We're going to create an ordered list of things to do in order to achieve whatever our goal is. For example, if we're going to break into the vault in House Kundark and Eberron, we're going to start by just going a list of things we need to do. We need to locate which vault. We need to find out how we're going to avoid the guards. How are we going to open the safe? How are we going to keep from getting caught? All those things. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to manage the risk. What can we do ahead of time to reduce the chances of something occurring so we don't have to deal with it on the fly? The goal of these two things is supposed to make the characters look competent. It's supposed to make it look like these characters know what they're doing and how to do it. Knowing what to do in order to get the job done, but also knowing how to handle the challenges that arise during the job in a way that's orderly and in some sort of control. And these are both important parts of getting through an actual heist or caper scenario.
Yeah, exactly. So why do we why do we even want to do why do you even want to do this in your game, right? And I think I've never heard it better put than how Dane Cook put it in one of his comedy routines, right? And to quote Dane Cook, he said, right, there are other things that guys want besides sex. We're just a little embarrassed to admit them, but I'm putting it out in the universe so that you can respect us for who we are as men. For example, any guy here, more than sex, if they had the choice of sex or this one other thing, any guy would rather be part of a heist.
Damn Skippy.
Right? Which is just to be funny, right? In other words, what we're saying is genre emulation, right? We like these plans because it's not that we like planning, right? No one sits around. I'm a project manager. I don't sit around wanting to make plans, right? I want to go do something cool, right? And that's what we want to do in our games, right? We want to do something cool. We want to have a heist. We want to have an ambush or a rescue, or something like that that's complicated. And we want to do it and we want to look cool, right? And we know this because we know this is true, right? We know this is a thing we dig because there are so many movies and TV shows that are about this.
Yep.
Movies like Ocean's 11, the Mission Impossible movies. For those of you older people like me and Phil and Bob, The Sting, or The Great Muppet Caper.
Yeah.
It's awesome, yes.
Actually, The Great Muppet Caper has a heist and a second heist to stop the first heist.
It's awesome.
It involves a long planning session with Fozzie Bear's inspirational speech. So
wait a minute. There was an anti-heist?
There was an anti-heist during the heist, and the best part is Fozzie Bear gives the inspirational speech that gets it started. So,
that's amazing.
Yes. I did a little heist research today. And second of all, you've got the TV show Leverage, which is an entire series based on the idea of heists and plans and capers and shenanigans.
Oh, I mean, I love Leverage, right? I was a I watched every episode. I love that show. It is one of the best representations of this genre. But all the other ones that you named, like I remember being a kid watching The Sting for the first time, and I was like, this is about, like, once I understood what was happening, I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Right. And then, like, that's never gone away. I love heist movies. So genre emulation is a big part of why we don't really, let me be clear. No one wants planning in their games, but everybody wants to do the thing that these plans lead to.
I forgot. Avengers Endgame is a heist movie.
Yes, it is a time heist.
Holy cow, it's a time heist. Yes.
Yeah. Again, which, you know, it has all of the things that we love about a heist in it, right? It's got a plan, right? There's a whole planning montage, right? And when they're all sitting in the room.
Yep.
There's a great explanation of the ether.
I'm going to go on record and quote one of my players when I found out they were using heist mechanics in every game we were doing. And they said, there's no role-play game situation that can't be made better by making it into a heist.
Well, you know, it's actually a good point, right? Because, I mean, well, we can diverge off that anyway. But anyway, so the thing is, what we really love, right, is we really love seeing the cool plan go off. Mm-hmm. That's the piece that we really love. Mm-hmm. And what gets us is, and this is like, you know, this is even better than just the plan going off smoothly, is when the twist occurs, because all heists have an unexpected twist. Mm-hmm. When the twist occurs, and it looks like everybody's going to get busted, but there was already a plan for how to deal with the twist. And Leverage is the master of this, right? Every Leverage episode looks like the team is screwed. And then at the last minute, nothing works out the way you think it's going to. The bad guy loses everything and the team like walks off laughing, right? Mm-hmm. And we love it. So the reason why we do this in our games is because we want that genre emulation. We want to do those cool looking things. We want to look cool executing our plans. All right.
But it doesn't always work that way. So why does it rarely work the way we want it to when we're trying to do a role-playing game? And the ugly truth is that planning takes a lot of work. And role-playing planning is generally not that much fun the way it's been traditionally revealed in games. It requires a lot of brainstorming. It requires revisions. It requires a lot of knowledge people need to have, a lot of arguments and debates and all of that, none of which makes for really fun role-playing at the table. And it basically ends up taking more work than we generally want to devote in a game, but we still want the results it produces.
Yeah, that's the paradox of this, right? Like, so take it from a professional project manager, right? My big project for this year was 9 days. 9 days of execution, right? 9 days from the time I hit the go button on the actual do the project part. It took 1 year to plan that project. 1 year of meetings, 1 year of discussing, disagreeing, collaborating, cooperating, all of that to get to a plan that we could execute. And then it still didn't go 100%. We had to fix things on the fly, which was also, fully expected. But so it's like Jerry said, it's super hard to actually do this in game. Anyway, please continue.
Well, no, that's an important point, because what happens in games is just like when we talk about why mysteries don't always work, why red herrings don't always work. When you're writing a story, you have control over what happens next.
Yes. Yeah, we can write over those pieces, right?
The players don't have all the information. They generally don't, and that's what makes the planning more fun later on down the line. But when planning comes on a table, it's often a pretty painful activity, and there's a number of reasons why.
Yeah, so the first one is it's got to do with skills, right? So for the most part, and don't take any offense to this, but for the most part, most people do not know how to plan a complex problem or objective.
Some people think they do.
Oh, lots of people think they do.
Really understand just what it takes to make a complex plan.
Yeah. And planning requires a level of collaboration. It requires a lot of listening, logic. I will say it requires a certain amount of pattern matching to kind of look for things, problems, things like that. These are not skills taught universally, right? Like this, I mean, let's be truthful. This is why I have a job, right? Like I have a job because, I have a particular set of skills, right? Like, but no, truthfully, like I was trained to do this, right? Like there's actual training and stuff like that for learning how to do this. So the first part of this is a lot of people don't have the skills for it. So what it means is, to go back to Bob's part, a lot of people think they have the skills for this. So what it really comes down to is there are many ways to plan poorly, right? There's few ways to plan well, and there are many ways to plan poorly that still feel like you made a plan.
Yeah.
Right. So you could just have, the first problem is you could just have a flawed plan, right? And there are a number of ways it could be flawed. You might have the wrong sequence of events. You might have misunderstood something the GM said and omitted a step.
What do you mean there's a vault?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The GM said it once, no one heard it, and now the players are standing in front of a vault with no way to open it. Right. The other thing is, like, you could have heard everything and made a plan, but okay, and this is the hard part, right? When you're planning in the real world, you only take the people you need to get the job done, right? So like when I make up a project team, I figure out what the work is, and then I only ask for the people who are going to do that work. I don't ask for other people to be sitting around. But in a role-playing game, when we have to make a plan, we really need to include everybody at the table. Otherwise, when you go to execute the plan, like 3 people are just sitting there while like the wizard and the rogue run off and are, disarming traps and casting illusion stuff. And literally the rest of the party's like, why am I even here? Right? Why did I even come to the game today? So there's a secondary art of, I need to make a plan for this role-playing thing, and I need to make sure that everybody at the table has a thing that they can do, that they can contribute. And that's even harder. And so when you do that wrong, then the barbarians like sitting around the whole session being like, well, I just got nothing to do, right? Like, and like, that's not fun.
No.
This is why back in the early days of role-playing games, we used to see so many thief-based adventures that basically devolved into a room or two of sneaking, and then the party just comes in and starts killing their way through the building because there's nothing for them to do.
Yeah. The barbarian's like, wait, I know how to solve this problem. Right? Like, I solved this with a battle axe. And then we're on. What's another thing about planning that, what's another reason, Jared, that this doesn't work the way people think it will?
Planning in the role-playing game is not that sexy.
Oh, no, it's not.
It's not a very exciting time in terms of what you're doing in a role-playing game session, unless you're role-playing with Brad Pitt and George Clooney, but that's a different kind of game.
Well, that would be very different.
Yes. Planning requires a lot of talking, but not much action. It's often done somewhere where the players are safe, so there's not really any threat to what's going on. And the GM ends up often being just sidelined, sitting around while the players plan, oftentimes just shaking their head as the players come up with misinformation or make things much more complicated than they need to be.
Yes.
Last week, Ange posted the question, what happens when your players make a mountain out of a molehill? Planning is where that often occurs.
Oh, yeah.
As the players spin things up bigger and bigger and bigger and don't have enough information.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because it's a player-centric activity, like we said in the definition, right? The GM almost always gets sidelined when this happens. And again, nobody's going to be planning their heist in the middle of a firefight. So it's not like other activities where I can have a really dramatic scene between 2 characters in the middle of a gunfight, right? Like I can do that. And that's really interesting because I've combined drama and action. But if I try to run a combat and have the players try to plan something, like, I think it's interesting and it might be fun to try, but I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to go.
Yeah, that would happen like probably once, and then the players would probably be like, "Yeah, let's never do that again."
Yeah, so
I'm thinking the same thing. I think that sounds like an amazing one-time encounter, though.
Yeah. I think it's like a one-time you try it. Like, yeah. I think you'll have mixed results. But often when you let the players go plan, they like sneak off to their hidden layer, right? So now it's like, now as a GM, you're literally just sitting there like, well, I can't really have ninjas kick in the door on this thing because 1, it'll ruin their plan, and 2, this is supposed to be their secret layer. I'm not supposed to, like nobody knows where it is anyway. Yeah. So then you're just like, do. Anyway, all right. Here's another problem. Organizing work is easier than risk management. And what I mean by that is coming up with the ordered list of what needs to get done it isn't super easy, but a lot of people working as a group, a lot of groups can actually, figure this out, right? We need to find the vault. We need to find a way into the building. We need to get to the vault. We need to crack the vault. We need an escape.
Most groups are generally going to be able to come up with that list. Some will be doing it quickly. Some of them will take a little longer. But generally, you're all going to get that list.
Right. Here's where it gets confounded, right? So it's the risk management part that's actually a lot harder, right? Mitigation and contingencies. And the real danger is that people mix these things together while they're working, right? So you're in the middle of creating the ordered list and you're like, okay, so we're going to pick the lock, we're going to pick the side lock on the side door. And somebody's like, what if the guards show up? Right? Now we're having two totally different things, right? Yep. One person's asking, what's our contingency, right? If the guard shows up, or what are we going to do to mitigate that? While the other person's trying to lay out the ordered sequence. Yep. Right. And so what happens is a lot of groups, and I will tell you this happens not only at role-playing tables, this happens with professional IT people, is that they run down the rabbit hole of the risk part and not finish doing the ordered list part. So part of my job a lot of times is I've got to pull people back onto the task and be like, okay, if nothing goes wrong, tell me these steps. And then later I have to come back and be like, okay, based on this ordered list, now tell me what could go wrong.
Yeah,
right?
If you don't finish making the list.
Right. Yeah. And you spend 2 hours arguing about what to do to not get caught at the side door and forget to deal with what do we need to bring to break open the vault.
I'll tell you that is also a common problem among convention organizers as well.
Yeah. Well, it's a problem in planning in general, is that you got to separate the task work from the risk management. Yep. And it's hard because your brain jumps for problems. Yeah. Right. And it's not that problems don't exist, but I'm telling you from a project management point of view that I need people to deal with one and then the other. So I often will set the ground rules like, okay, if nothing goes wrong, lay out for me how we're going to do this, and then come back and be like, cool, based on this outline, now tell me everything that can go wrong. And then third part is, okay, if this is one of the things that can go wrong, do we need a contingency or do we need to mitigate this? Yeah. So again, when I tell you it's not sexy, right? The planning's not sexy. It's not, right? This it's iterative and it's boring. I don't find it boring because I like these things, but it's iterative and you work a plan and then you go back and you rework it and then you analyze it, you turn it sideways. And again, you don't want to do this in a role-playing game, right? This isn't the fun part of the role-playing game. Breaking into the vault is the fun part. Okay. What's another problem, Jared? Because there's one more that clobbers this all the time.
And that's imprecise data. The challenge that the player in a role-playing game end up trying to make their plans with lack of data. The GM knows most of the details. The players know almost none. They don't have all the knowledge and experience that their characters would have either. Very few players at the table are actually rogues and fighters or, good at planning heists or, some of them might be computer hackers these days. But they don't have all the knowledge and experience that the characters have. And so they can't make educated decisions on things that their characters would know about. The game emulates that knowledge experience as part of what you do for dice rolling, but the planning itself is done at the player level. Meaning the players have to shoulder the burden of planning what to do without the benefit of the knowledge that their characters might have.
Planning has the same problem that puzzles in a game do.
Yep.
You've got a puzzle that the players need to figure out. And you get a bunch of players that, I suck at this kind of puzzle. The characters probably figure that out in 5 minutes of brainstorming. But the players are like, what the fuck am I looking at? I don't know.
Yeah. And this is this is a thing that, so a lot of OSR games like this. Right. So a lot of OSR games like the fact that that kind of logic, intuition and things like that is pushed to the player level. Right. And you see that in old school D&D where in old school D&D, you would have, the GM would put a puzzle on the table and make you figure it out. And when you get to 3.0 and going further, the skill system is the thing that emulates that. And so you can either leave the puzzle in, or you can start doing things like, cool, there's this complicated lock and it looks like some sort of sliding logic puzzle. Somebody go ahead and give me a DC 15 intelligence check.
Yep.
Right. And then that system is the emulation of, oh, well, I've got a 20 intelligence, right? I got a +5 bonus. I can knock this thing off and it's unlocked.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
as much as people poke at Pathfinder for having a lot of complicated rules and too many rules, that was something they did very well in their early modules. Their very first, whatever they call their Adventures League, had a thing where in order for the players to get information, they had to solve 5 puzzle boxes. And each one was a different one. Was a history box, one was a nature box, one was a musical box. And they gave you the handouts, but right in the rules it says, let the players look at each puzzle for a few minutes, and as soon as it looks like they're either don't know how to solve it or are bored, have them make a roll. But they might have the knowledge they need to do this. They might be able to make an educated
If they get it, that's awesome. If they don't, say, hey, make a roll for that. And
that was the standard for the first couple of years, but they always had these little puzzles in there, which are, here, let your players look at this, give them 5 minutes to think about it, and if nobody comes up with a solution, have them make a nice roll.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, right? Like that's
a way really well done.
Yeah, I think it's a great way to bridge puzzles. Some people are going to get it. Like I suck at puzzles.
Yeah, me too.
I suck at all of those things. Those little logic, those little logic puzzles, whatever. Like I suck at every one of those, and I don't enjoy it. Right? I don't enjoy sitting there twisting in the wind.
GM puts rules on the table. It's okay when I need to roll your passes.
Yeah, and I mean, but if I also am playing the character that has like no intelligence bonus, I'm also comfortable being like, yep, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Can I hit it with my axe? Kind of,
when those show up in video games, I immediately I'm like, oh, it's a question puzzle. Google. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I take my ability to Google my way out of this problem.
I take zero joy out of solving those for other reasons. So I'll just go right past them. But other people love them though. That's great.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If your game group loves them, it's awesome. And and it's a way to go. And if you don't, you don't. But it is this problem, this imprecise data thing, right? Because our characters are a simulation. Right. Our characters are a simulation of a person. Like, for instance, if I have pilot 5 out of 5, right? If I have pilot 5 out of 5, I know a ton of stuff about piloting a starship, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a ton of stuff about piloting a starship. I don't even know how starships really work in the universe that we're playing in, but my character does.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you're making that plan, it might be important that my starship knowledge might be the thing that we need as part of that plan, but I may not know it, right? So this imprecise data and this emulation of knowledge and experience, right? If I'm a level 10 if I'm a level 10 character with 5 out of 5 in pilot, like not only am I a really good pilot, but I've done some shit.
You can strap an engine on it and you can fly it.
Right. Not only that, but like I can probably be like, oh, this is like this is like the Nutari Nebula thing where we did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Like I always find it interesting, like in Star Trek, a quick aside, where all of the defensive patterns have like some sort of, like pattern, Delta 3. And everybody seems to know what that is. They're like, cool, Delta 3, right, I got it, check, So somehow, that's knowledge that as if you were playing a starship captain, you wouldn't have, but but it's a thing you emulate. And emulation's fun, right? Like that's what we want out of a game. Okay. So cool. So this now brings us to, having now understood what planning is, understanding the flaws in planning, it's not going to make it go away, right? You're never going to play a game. You're never going to play a game where there's no planning ever. So if planning activities are going to occur, like people are going to sit and make a plan.
You can make it fun.
Yeah. What can we do to help this?
So if we're going to make this a fun part of the game, we just need to solve the issues we defined above. So first, if you're going to play in the game, you as the GM need to help facilitate it to the group. You're on the outside of the group, so it gives you a perfect chance to help the group work towards the plan without necessarily giving them the plan itself. And And there's going to be some pushback from the players sometimes if you do this, because some of them are going to be afraid of the fact that as soon as you hear their plan, you're going to change the opposition in order to thwart their plans.
Yeah.
And this comes from distrust. Different play groups are going to have different levels of this.
And that's a dick move.
Yeah. It's something you don't want to see. Yes.
Thank you. If you are a GM who was like, oh, of course I would totally do that if my players let me help them plan. Or, hey, while I'm sitting listening to them plan, I'm fixing the adventure. Dick move. Don't do that.
As a GM, if your players are coming up with a really good plan, there's nothing wrong with you slightly nudging things towards their ideas to make it so that they actually have some goal in mind. You know?
I'm perfectly content if my players have thought of a plan that with a few skill checks are going to, bypass all of the opposition and get the goodies.
Yeah.
Who am I to get in their way? Congratulations, guys. That was freaking brilliant. I totally didn't see that as even an option on the table. You guys did it. You made all your rolls. You spent whatever resources to secure those rolls. Well done. I'm glad that was easy for you.
Yeah.
That being said, though, the first time they fail one of those rolls, there's nothing wrong with sliding in that little complication and going, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, no. If you fail a roll. So we're talking about planning right now. If we were talking about executing heists, as an aside, a failed roll is exactly your moment for introducing the complication that people did not expect.
Correct.
All right.
So overall, though, your goal as a GM is to help to facilitate Misdirected Mark, word scramble. Overall, your goal is to facilitate the process. So there's a bunch of tips we can have to help to make this less painful.
Yeah, there are some things we can do. All right. So the first one is give a fixed time for planning. Now, I know this goes against everything I said where planning takes a long time, whatever. We're going to talk about some things after this that will help shorten how much actual planning time has to go into something. Mm-hmm. But you got to hold down the planning to some amount of time. If it is so complicated, I like 15, 20 minutes. If I'm doing this at a convention, I might do this where I get the players set up and let them get started talking, and then I might go refill my water. Mm-hmm. Right? Hey, I'm just going to walk over there. I'm going to fill up my water. I'll come back. I'll answer any questions you have. And, we're going to, at 12:45, we'll wrap up the plan. We'll take a bio break, and then we'll jump into the doing part. Right? So giving them a time box will help, because if you give them a time box, there won't be enough time for them to just roam around every contingency, right? Yep. Having constraints helps you focus. Mm-hmm. But if it is something more complicated, then, and you're playing in something more episodic like a campaign, then do it between games. Mm-hmm. I ran my D20 heist game many, many years ago. Bob was a player in that game. And the setup for that game was always the same formula, which was the first adventure of a new heist was all intelligence gathering. Mm-hmm. So the players made whatever checks they wanted, and I gave them all the information, right? Somebody made a check about the opposition, the security system, the route to get out of the, to get from the penthouse to the garage, whatever. I would give them all that information and whatever else we did for that session. And then we'd end the session, and we played bi-weekly. So we played every other week. We'd end the session, and then everybody would go online and hash out the plan. Right? Give them 2 weeks to just argue with each other. They'd come up with a plan. And then when we came back to the game, the next session, we would do the plan. And then we had a third session, which was the fallout, right? You're going to see when we talk about this in a second about mechanisms, you're going to see that actually kind of lines up kind of closely to to another game. Yep. In terms of those particular, those types of adventures. But I did that thing for many, many heists, and it was very effective in that it took the gut-wrenching and painfully boring part, pushed it into the dead space between sessions, which had the added benefit of having my players engaged in the off weeks because they were working on the plan the whole time. Yep. And then arriving at the table with a plan so that the next time we played, we were back to play it.
Yep, ready to go.
And that helped, and that helped a lot. And D20 Modern was not a game that helped with any of that. So this was the best way to deal with it, was get it off the table.
That was a great way to mitigate the lack of mechanical procedures for doing a plan.
Yep. All right. What's another thing, Jerry, people can do?
As a GM, make sure that you have good facilitation practices. As much as the walk off and get your drink of water, be in earshot so that you can make sure that everybody's heard at the table. This is just like any other time you're being the GM with the game. Part of your job is to make sure that everybody's involved. So if you see two people are doing all the planning and somebody else looks like they've got an idea, feel free to step in and say, what do you, hey, Bob, what do you think? Hey, Phil, do you have an idea for this? And also look to help them find compromises. When you get the two players who have very diametrically opposed views on where they want to go or what resources they want to use, step in and help them find compromises. Help them to come to something that can work for one or both of them. Occasionally, you just have to point out that just sounds, that does sound like it's not going to work in this situation. The guards are much too alert to fall for that particular ruse or something on that line.
Yeah, or if you blow up those doors, guards are going to come running from everywhere.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I often will that's we'll talk about that actually in a second about free information. But I think the other thing that goes with facilitation, I guess the other thing that I would mention is when we did the original episode in 173, one of the things we talked about as a pitfall to planning is the alpha player syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. That all of a sudden, like one person at the table is like, I'm going to tell you how we're doing this plan.
Yeah.
Bob, you're going to do this. Jerry, you're going to do this. Right. And like totally just, we see this in board games, like cooperative board games and stuff, like somebody swamps the table, the alpha gamer. Right.
Yep.
And that's where having somebody like, especially the GM, because you're literally sitting around not doing anything, doing that facilitation helps rein in.
Yep.
Like, get a hold of that alpha gamer and sit them back down. Because otherwise what happens is that person railroads the planning session. Everybody's mildly annoyed, but more importantly, when something goes wrong, now everybody's pissed at that person.
It's all his fault.
You didn't listen to us. Now we're like all shot up in a van, blah, 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 and like, and then you're just like, you're losing everything, right? You're losing you're losing group cohesion, right? You've lost your dynamics in trouble. Like it gets very messy. I've seen all of this. Okay. The other thing you can do is, and again, we touched on this before, is when you are sitting back as the GM, or even if you're a player, keep an eye on when are you talking about order of tasks and when are you talking about risk management, and try to have those as separate conversations. Because again, mixing those two is an easy way to bog down your progress. Because listen, you are much better off if you have 15 to 20 minutes to plan your heist. You are much better off getting the order of events correctly and in-game, on the fly, dealing with the problems that creep up than you are spending 10 minutes postulating what happens if a guard shows up at the side door, only to find out the GM never had any guards at the side door.
Yeah.
And you breezed right through it. You just blew 10 minutes having a conversation that didn't mean anything. But if you open the door and find a guard there and the GM goes, what do you do? The players will figure something out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So help keep them as the 90s song says, keep them separated.
Exactly. Gotta love the offspring.
That's right. What's the last thing? Because we scraped the edge of this. But what was that last thing that you should do?
Give information freely. The more information they have, the easier it is to both plan and manage risk. Respect the competency of the characters. They know what they're doing. They're good at their job. If somebody brings up something like, hey, I'm a member of the Thieves Guild, I might know something about that door, tell it to them, give it to them. That's something they should have. Or give them a role to figure it out. Give them at least some basic information. If, they're a bounty hunter, they probably know something about what kind of scum and villainy is going to be in that bar when they walk in, that sort of thing. But assume that your characters are more competent at their jobs than the players sitting at the table are.
Yep.
It's such a big one, right? Because it is that thing like where somebody's like, oh, you know what? Let's use an explosive pack on the door. And, you're like, hey, just so that you know, as an experienced mercenary, as you are, if you blow up a door like that, it definitely is going to alert guards like from like a half a kilometer away, right? Like the whole place will be crawling. Now they may turn around and be like, yes, and that's exactly what we want to set up our ambush, right? Yeah. And that's okay. But it is making sure that like the worst feeling in a game is when the players think that they've got a really cool plan and then they do something and the GM's like, that's so dumb. Of course, like the guards all show up and they're like, what? Like,
or another possibility is you've got the crew that's like, we're going to go through this. We're going to execute this plan without killing anyone. Nobody dead. And then the guy starts planting the explosives on the door and the GM goes, hey, you know from having worked with explosives for a long time that if you use that amount on that door, you are probably going to kill the guy in the room on the other side.
So can I tell you that in my youth, I actually failed this moment?
You tried.
I did a bad job. I will tell you why I did a bad job. I did a bad job. I'm going to tell you a bad GM story. Back in the day when I was in high school, I believe I was in 10th grade, I was running Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And I had a group of mutant animals. There was a hostage situation at a high school, which was, because I was in 10th grade, looked like my high school. And one of the players, somebody we all know and love, Sean, had a mutant bird who had explosive tip arrows. The explosive tip arrows had a 20-foot radius. Very important. 20-foot radius.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as they're planning their entries into the different parts of the school to defeat the mutant animal terrorists that have taken it over, Sean's like, I'm going to blow up the cafeteria doors with one of my exploding tipped arrows, take out any guards behind the door. And I'm like, okay, your arrows have a radius of 20 feet. He's like, yes. And I repeated it, 20 feet radius. Yes. So he fires the arrow, blows open the door, blows up 15 or so school children because they were all not near the door, but within 20 feet of the door. And I had said radius, and that's not what Sean was thinking. And I should have said, hey, you know that you've used these arrows before. You really need to fire this arrow short so that the outer edge of the explosion hits the door, blows it inward, knocks off the guys without blowing up anyone inside. I did not do that. I relied on Sean knowing geometry. We were in 10th grade, and that didn't connect, and therefore he blew up a bunch of children. Obviously, the plan went to shit. The players all then ran away, never freed the rest of the school children, went underground and ran away, and like completely jacked most of my plans for that game until it like took me several sessions to clean up a bunch of that. But again, that was bad of me, right? I should have said, you own these arrows, you have fired them before. You need to put the arrow 20 feet from the door to blow the doors in safely. Bad GM. Give information freely and believe in the competence of the players who are there, right? Believe in the competency of the character. Yeah.
All right.
That was me, man. I was listen, all my GMing advice comes from the skeletons of all the bad shit I did as a GM. Like, you know, that moment in Terminator where, you know, the Terminator's just walking over all the skulls, right? And that's me.
Yep.
This is why I like it when the players want to adopt some sort of NPC into the group, even if they're not incredibly competent. Because as the GM, this also gives you a chance to have a voice in the group itself that says something like, you know what? If you fire at the door, that's 20-foot radius. Isn't that going to like blow up things 20 feet inside the room?
Yes.
Without necessarily calling the players stupid, it's one character talking to another. This is why I love it when the players adopt. I don't care if it's a talking mongoose. Somebody could just come in and give the players some sort of point of view.
I believe that C-3PO was the GM PC in Star Wars, right? Like C-3PO is always trying to give them some advice the players refuse to listen to at all times, right? Like,
yeah.
I wouldn't go into that asteroid field. Shut up, 3PO, right? Like,
not only that, but he's the good egghead PC because he's got all that knowledge and smarts, you know? It's like the nerdy kid with the glasses going, you know, if you shoot that arrow at the door, Pythagoras' theorem, pi r squared, you know.
Bob, do me a favor. Remind me when we get to the conversation corner to tell you about the Foghorn Leghorn little egghead kid moment my dad and I had.
Oh, yeah.
It was a classic moment between my dad and I. It was what you call it, quite funny. All right.
So, all right. Now we've talked about all the things that can help with planning. It's still planning, and so you're gonna have some flaws there. So you know what's even better than having planning, Phil? What's better than having planning?
What's better than planning is to have game mechanics that emulate all the benefits of planning, that actually cut down on doing real planning, but adhere to all the tropes of being prepared and hyper competency and things like that. By mechanizing planning and mechanizing preparedness and things like that, you address the emulation issue, right? Because now the mechanics are demonstrating how good the characters are at this without you having to be good at this. And the beauty of having redone this topic 5 years later is we can look at, I think what I will say is probably the best example of how to do heists in role-playing games, which is the Forged in the Dark system. I don't think a system, I have my issues with some other parts of Forged in the Dark. Like I've got some issues with the layout of Blades in the Dark in terms of information layout. But let me tell you that mechanically, this game has got heist down. Not to say other games don't. I'm going to get somebody on here in a second who's going to be like, leverage Cortex. And I do not disagree with you. Leverage Cortex, yes. But I think Forged in the Dark games have this system mechanized wonderfully. Now, you two have been playing a whole bunch of Scum and Villainy, right?
Yep.
Are you in that game, Jer?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right, good. So then you are very comfortable explaining what are the things that the system does right to make it feel like a plan.
That's a little tougher. I have my issues actually with how.
I shouldn't have highlighted this section for you.
I have some problems with how they.
Oh no!
Because the only problem I have with Forged in the Dark games is that almost all the Forged in the Dark games make you play the mechanics instead of role playing the situation.
Okay, well,
and this is one of those things where I'm gonna get there. I like it. It has some flaws, but here are some of the things that they do right. Number one is the approach. You pick your initial plan of how to start, you make your roll, and then you jump into playing out that part of the plan. Which
and you don't
pretty well
plan anything else.
No.
No.
And that's the tricky part, is make sure people only do, how are we going to do this heist? How are we going to do it? Is this heist going to be a sneaky heist? Is it going to be an intel heist? Is it going to be a stealthy heist? Is it going to be a snatch and grab? What is the approach? And then you make your dice roll and you kind of work your way into the mechanics of that dice roll. Then you jump into playing the plan. It's not bad. It's not at all bad. It's a lot of fun. I think it needs some work. But anyway, then they use my favorite thing, which is flashbacks.
Oh, yes.
And flashbacks get used in a lot of games. And this is where when something comes up, you can have a flashback. And that flashback allows you to come up with some reason or some way for how you're going to deal with the present situation. And this has been, I'm not sure which game system used this mechanic first, but it's becoming almost universal across a lot of different games. And Forged in the Dark does it well. I think other games do that flashback better than Forged in the Dark does.
What I like about Forged in the Dark is you pay that flashback, you pay in points based on how probable it is that you would have accounted for that thing, right? So if it's something really minor, it's like, oh yeah, you just need like a point or two to like
a free one.
Yeah, you get right. But if it's something like completely ridiculous, it's like, oh no, you're going to get this, but you're going to pay for this. Like, this is coming with a cost. Which, all right, so now let me just quickly aside before we jump, because we're going to talk about a couple of other games that do this well.
Let me just, I think the difference there was that you said that the best example of looking how, I think it's a good example of how it's done right. I don't think it's the best. I don't think any of these are the best. I think each of them does it well in a different way.
I will show my math for why I think this, why, whether you like playing Forged in the Dark games or not, I will explain why I think this is a good example. One, it gets rid of extended planning, because what it does is it makes you pick the approach. That first roll of the approach determines how difficult your next action is going to be. But then from there, you just keep playing by just asking what next, right? And it basically tells you, don't let players plan the whole adventure, right? Come up with this is a stealth approach, this is a whatever, and then just start playing the game. And then it accounts for anything that does come up by having the flashback mechanism, so it emulates competence, right? So now, because we didn't plan, when I tell you there's a vault and you're like, oh shit, there's a vault, right? Now you're like, oh, but of course we brought the torch to cut through the thing, spend a few points, bring out the torch, right? Yeah. So what it really does well, and what I really like about this game, and I will editorialize my feelings about the game in a second, is that it forces you not to create the ordered list of tasks beyond the first one or two tasks.
Yes.
And it handles contingency. And technically it handles mitigation too, but it handles risk management in real time. Right. And because of that, I can tell players, don't plan. Just like pick a direction, let's get going. And that, I think, helps a lot, because it really cuts down on actual planning. Now, everything that the chat room's saying and everything you're saying about this game is true. It is a heavy procedural game.
Yes.
It is a game about playing the game.
Yes.
And depending on who's GMing it, the role-playing part of the game is in the first phase of the game. Right? The phase that leads up to the job is your role play talky part. And then when you are ready to do a job, you engage the job mechanics, and it is a very procedural thing that you do. You're still going to make decisions, you're still going to play, but you are in a framework that is going to take you through the rest of the job.
Bob, is that I don't see that as the way we played it as much. We did a lot of our first of all, the approach often took several minutes for us to plan what approach we wanted.
Sure.
And then the actual, like, we had a couple of scenarios that the actual procedure of the game took 2 or 3 sessions.
I don't think that's, I mean, I think
and that's not bad. It was a lot of fun. We did a lot of things, but I don't remember flashbacks being as, Bob, correct me on this, I don't remember flashbacks being as prevalent in some of our games.
We did not end up using flashbacks as often as we probably could have. There were some opportunities where I thought, this would be a good place for a flashback, but we worked through it without it.
Also, I think some of the complications were created by us on the fly.
Yeah, we did that to ourselves a bunch of times too. The other thing was that Chris was running the game on what he called pulp mode. Yeah. So he was leaning a little bit more towards the action-y fun.
To be clear, there is no pulp mode in those rules.
Right.
yes, we know.
He stretched things a little bit because he wanted a certain feel for the game.
But I've played it a couple of times with other GMs, and it's a good game, but it's very procedural. And I don't think I like everything in it a lot. I don't think it's the best heist game out there.
I think there are a number of heist games out there. I've shown why I like it as an example for.
I like it a lot.
Having mechanized away planning. I don't necessarily think that is the end all solution. And just saying in the chat room, right, that she actually prefers a little bit of planning, and that's perfectly fine, right? That is a very valid approach.
However,
Blades in the Dark does away with it completely. Other games, we're going to list a few of them, solve parts of it without solving all of it.
before we jump in there, I just want to say, after all my caveats, number one, I love Scum and Villainy. I will play it again, Blades of the Dark again. And if you're having trouble as a GM, figure out how to do some of these things, read Scum and Villainy and play out one of those heists, and you'll be able to see how to incorporate a lot of other things. Even if you don't use those rules, the game is set up to pull off heists and does it well.
Right. Here's my one here's my one thing I will say about that game, right? It is heavily procedural. You drift from the procedures, your mileage will vary. You know, if you're going to go off prescription. Okay. Here's some other games that I think have some decent mechanics. The Sprawl, which Schmitty had mentioned. Mm-hmm. The Sprawl, I think, gets a lot of this right as well. Yes. It does two things that I really like. It has a mechanism for what are called gear and intel tokens, which are basically like during different roles that you make, it'll tell you like gain a gear, gain a intel, and during the game you can trade your intel for a +1 bonus to some roll, but you just have to define what the intel was. Like if you're trying to run out of a building while being shot at by corp security, and you're like, cool, I'm going to spend an intel to get a +1 on this roll because I rolled a 7 to 9. I want to get a 10 and get out of here scot-free. You could be like, oh yeah, when the hacker was, bypassing security, they downloaded the blueprints to the building. I've got them up in my heads up display, and I'm taking a shortcut, through the office pool or something. And then gear is that you acquired gear that is necessary for the mission, but you don't have to define it up front. You define it in the game when you need it. Like all of a sudden you reach this door and it's like, oh, well, it's a biometric lock. And it's like, oh, well, I happen to have, such device that mimics, this, biometric pattern or whatever.
I just happen to have the severed thumb of one of those security guards.
Tell me you've got a cooler full of severed toes on this. Yeah. So the other thing I like is that Sprawl gives you an objective list. The GM actually lists out for you. You will get experience points when these things happen. And the objectives are very broad, right? Like you will get an experience point when you hit the milestone of breaking into the building. You will get one when you find the vault. You will get one when you open the vault. You will get one when you successfully extract. Now, I just ordered like that objective list ordered the mission for you, right? We've just handled the whole ordering of the mission. Like, cool, we need to play to find out how we get in the building. We need to play to find out how we're going to find the vault. And then we can do whatever we can kidnap a guard, we can hack the system, like we can disguise ourselves and ask somebody. Like, it doesn't say how you have to do it. It just says what you got to do.
Plus, it's a clean shortcut. I love that. It's a clean shortcut for, the mission goes horribly wrong at one step of the process and everybody has to bail. But you're like, okay, well, we met these 3 objectives before the mission went, tits up. So now we know we've got this many experience points because we got that far into it.
Plus, that game was I really liked the Sprawl. I thought that it really handled it played and felt like a good Cyberpunk game without all the crazy rules. There was a lot of role playing involved.
Bonkers rules.
Yep. And I really thought I have to reiterate, I thought the gear and intel thing was a lot of fun. The Sprawl really works well to make, because it's a PBTA game, everybody is mildly competent at everything, but everybody has a niche, but you don't have to have that niche character in the game to make things work. And there's a lot of ways to get different things that we needed for that game. It was a great heist game. I really thought the Sprawl would probably be another one that I would say, if you like PBTA games and you like heists or capers, the Sprawl is a great way to start.
I think the Sprawl. I think Sprawl's fantastic for all of that. I think it by using that mission objective thing, it just assumes that all the characters are competent, right? Like you don't need to figure out this ordered list. Of course, these are the things you need to do. Right. That coming up with that ordered list isn't interesting. Answering the question of how are you going to meet each one of these, that's interesting. I will probably run the Sprawl again at some point. I also thoroughly liked it. I was in a weird place. I was jacking around the game and trying to make it into Shadowrun or whatever.
Don't need to do that.
I should have just left it alone as a sprawl game. We can come back and play that again at some point. All right, another one that I really like, Tales from the Loop, has, I think it's called the group, I want to say threat, but I don't think that's the right name for it. It's the group task. Ange may know this.
I was just say, call Ange. Ange has run every Tales Loop game I've ever played. So
yeah, just wait a few seconds. Ange will put it up there. But it's the group. It's the group action, and you typically use it towards the end of a mystery, where you basically come up with an objective. Like, all right, you now have to turn off like siren heads, amplifiers, and then everybody goes around the group and says like, cool, I'll distract them by using move, and I'll do, I'll sneak, I'll do this, I'll do that. And then everybody makes their rolls, they pool their successes together, and based on how many successes you get, it lets you overcome, like you determine if you overcome the challenge or if you're going to take conditions in order to overcome the challenge. But it's kind of a neat way where in Tales from the Loop, the story's not about heists and things like that. So it's about discovering things. So when you get to the part where it's like, well, we solved all the mystery and got to the part where the thing needs to be defeated or thwarted, that part gets mechanized down to like a handful of rolls and some narration, and then you're done. Right? It keeps the emphasis on the part that's really good. And because if you didn't have that, what you would wind up doing is you would wind up getting to the part of the mystery where you're like, okay, well, we know what to do. And now we're going to spend another 2 hours coming up with a plan for what to do about this.
Yeah.
And that's not what's fun about this game, right? What's fun about this game is figuring out what's going on. The doing part is quickly wrapped up in a very neat bow, which I appreciate greatly for Tales from the Loop. And then lastly, one of my favorites, and we'll talk about this again when we get into the freeform section, is the preparation skill from Night's Black Agents. So Night's Black Agents has 2 skills that I really like: contacts and preparation. And contacts is basically a skill you roll to know somebody when you need something. Yep. And preparation is a skill you roll to have been prepared for whatever just happened in the game. And all you got to do is make the roll and you're prepared. And there's like some great story they tell in the game as an example, where during playtesting, this vampire was getting away with, I can't remember if it was just the vampire or somebody else, but they had an escape plan and they were on a roof heading to a helicopter. And the sharpshooter of the group was like, I'm making a preparedness roll. And the GM's like, for what? He's like, the rocket launcher that I planted on the roof in case they were going to try to escape by helicopter. Makes the roll, picks up the rocket launcher and blows the helicopter as it's lifting off from the pad, defeating the vampire and everything else, right? It's this fantastic,
which is great.
But it's this example of like the hyper competence where, because again, in Night's Black Agents, you're playing Jason Bourne-like characters, right? So of course this character put, a rocket launcher hidden on the roof near the helipad, just in case the vampire tried to escape this way. That's so again, it emulates that hyper preparedness.
And I'll be talking about another one of my favorites when we get to the second half. So I'll wait till then.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Cool. So that's our look at planning, the issues that surround planning, and its role in the game. Take a break. We'll round table this topic when we get back. We're going to check in with the chat room. But Bob, tell us about another show on the Misdirected Mark Network.
So tonight we're going to highlight Bonus Experience. Ray and Monica are 2 old friends exploring gameplay and design through the lens of diversity, while also sharing some of the dumbest gaming humor. Misdirected Mark. Word scramble. Some of the dumbest humor gaming has to offer. Wow, I broke that one.
You know what? When you mention Ray and Monica, you know what I instantly think of is the Metatopia dinner. Where we were at the Asian fusion restaurant. Yep. And we had Rob take off his do-rag. We transformed Rob from Rob Abrazado to Mr. Abrazado.
Yep. Yes. Mr. Abrazado, the guy that runs the bodega on the corner.
Yeah. It's got the garden, right? That he yells at the kids for
you kids!
On his, get away from my garden. Yeah. Oh, so funny, right? Like just But the look, I just remember the look on Ray's face when
The look on
she's-
half of our faces like, whoa, that's what Rob looks like without the bandana.
Yep.
I'm the one who asked him to do it because I'm friends with him on Facebook, and one day he did that. He had a picture of him going to some school function or something like that, and he was like in a suit without the do-rag on, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And I I put a side-by-side comparison of pictures of Rob up. Like, have you seen, Rob Abrazado? Let me tell you about my character. And Mr. Abrazado, let me tell you how my tomato plants are doing this season.
Okay, so on to the chat room.
Yes.
Where Ange asked, what do you do about players who get stuck in a planning loop for things that don't matter?
Oh,
Like the game grinds to a halt because they're trying to account for every single contingency, but the things they're obsessing over are non-issues from the GM's perspective. And of course, the game doesn't have mechanics already that mitigate those.
The answer to that is, as the GM, just tell them, move on. Guys, or just tell them you're focusing on the wrong thing. This is where it's really great to have that spokesperson NPC in the group, or just as the GM say, listen, you guys are you're dragging your heels on this.
Yeah. I will just sometimes say as a GM, I'll be like, look, based on your vast knowledge as a interstellar mercenary, that's not a thing that you think would come up.
Yeah, you're way too deep in the weeds.
Right.
And that's my GM. This is. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's a Worthington 5000. It's a safe. You're going to crack it.
That's my GM advice, right? If I tell you you don't need to pay attention to something as a GM, that's my subtle way of telling you move along, right? Like, I don't want to be mean and be like, oh, don't think about these things. But it is a case of, I try to always pull it back to the character's knowledge, right? So I'll just be like, yes, as interstellar outlaw, that there's a chance that, space cops could be there, but in your expert opinion, you don't think there'll be any space cops nearby. Right. And then people be like, oh, cool. All right. Then I don't have to worry about space cops.
Yeah,
that's right.
But you always have to worry about space cops. No,
Yes.
No space cops are there, but space mafia.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's a good, it's one thing to just say from a GM point of view, and I think it's perfectly valid, right? Sometimes you can just say from a GM point of view, like, hey, that's not important, move along.
Yeah.
But I think often if you tie it back to the character and demonstrate their expertise, right? Then they may be a little more like, oh, okay, well, cool.
Because
I know, right? And again, this goes to that gap in that. So this is the thing where the player's like, I'm interstellar outlaw. I need to be really concerned about us being captured by space cops at every moment. Where interstellar outlaw knows, if I'm going to be traveling around this galaxy, I damn well know all the places to, where not to travel, where they're full of space cops.
Yeah.
And as Ange just said, don't then turn around after telling them not to worry about the space cops and have the space cops show up. Because that's Dick GM.
That's super dick move, right? That's don't whatever you do, don't do, right. Ange is 100% correct. If you tell them it's not a thing, it's not a thing. The worst thing you can do is have your players believe that as a GM, you are an unreliable narrator.
Yep.
Because if they think you're an unreliable narrator, they will second guess, test. They will do everything in their power to make sure that you're okay. And this is an 80s thing, right? Like so many 80s GMs I had screwed me on this kind of stuff that for years I was like, jumping at every shadow. Is it really fire? I'm going to poke my stick in it to see if it burns.
Or worse than the unreliable narrator is just the total adversarial GM who's out to get you at every corner.
I mean,
you don't want them thinking that, especially if you're not. If you just make a couple of bad statements and turn around, if you get them thinking that you're like that, it's over because they're going to question everything.
The adversarial GM is the T-Rex of GMs, right? It should just be a fossil. It should now be a story that we 80s, we Gen Xers.
It's my job to be their adversary. I play all the bad guys. That's not what it means. That's not what it means.
At this point, there are plenty of GMs out there that if your GM is pulling that kind of shit, tell them to fuck off and go find a better gaming group.
I mean, seriously,
call them on it once, because some GMs don't realize they're doing it. So first take them aside and say, listen, you told us we shouldn't worry about that. They might go, oh shit, that's right, I did. And then they'll rewind. In that case, they're learning, encourage them.
It's almost like open communication between human beings is essential for properly interacting with each other in a social environment.
My player group from a few years ago will tell you there was one night that we were going over it was actually a planning session. They were doing some planning, and they kept very carefully wording their questions. I'm like, guys, what do you want to do? I'm not going to screw you over. Great. Yes, you can do that. That'll work. And you could tell that they had obviously been with some 80s GMs where they felt that they had to.
They were super paranoid.
They had to be planning lawyers because they're afraid the GM. Like, no. I know what you guys are trying to do, and it looks good. It might not work exactly the way you want, but you'll get there. Go for it.
Here's the thing that I always say it's a good warning sign is if the players won't tell you directly what, like if they ask you an obtuse question, like say they're doing planning, right? And they're like, hey, what are those doors made out of? Mm-hmm. Right? And you're like, I don't know, metal. And they're like, yeah, but what kind of metal are they made out of? And you're like, why? And they're like, never mind. Right? Like that's a sign that a player is having a trust issue, right? Because if a player comes up to me and is like, hey, what kind of metal are those doors made out of? And I'm like, what are you looking for? And they're like, well, I'm wondering if there's a particular type of acid we could buy that'll dissolve the lock on the, that'll dissolve the door or whatever, but not harm whatever, not burn through the rest of the ship. And I'll be like, oh, cool, let's make a roll for that. Or yes, there is, but you're gonna, you have to get it from, you have to get it from Shady Trader, right? Shady Trader is the only person who has it, and you screwed Shady Trader over 2 sessions ago. So let's go have a dramatic scene where you try to convince Shady Trader.
Role-playing moment.
Yeah,
and the correct answer for that, by the way, is dilute nitric acid.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and that's, but it's a thing when players want to surprise the GM.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, don't ever, please don't surprise me. I want to be in on your plan because I don't want to change mine.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're gonna do awesome, I'm just gonna put it to the dice, right? I defer, especially in running heists and stuff like that. I defer decisions to the dice because I don't want to influence in any way possible. Like, oh, if you need to know a thing, we're probably gonna make you roll. Or if you need to get a thing, well, then we're gonna have to go find somebody who can do that. And I'm gonna let you find them. I just may make a roll for consequences. Like it takes longer than you wanted to find them. Or it's going to cost you more because you couldn't find, Shady Merchant was not around. Super Shady Merchant was around.
His cousin super shady.
I like to state this for all the GMs out there, to all the players out there. Don't ever feel you have to surprise us. Trust us. The things you guys do in game surprise us every week, even when you're following the plan.
Yeah, you don't have to work hard to surprise us. So we'll get surprised.
Yeah.
And that's again why I like the dice, right? Because when I give it to the dice and we roll, I don't know what's going to happen.
That's right.
Right? Like go ahead and make that roll. And then it's like natural 20. And we all, even me, I'm yelling. I'm like, oh man, you were this close to getting busted by space cops. But that roll, you're free and clear.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's jump back into part 2.
Let's put a pin in one thing. Chromatic Chameleon made the comment earlier that something to possibly looking for a topic down the road is how Apocalypse World and Forge of Dark and games like that, how they took the 90s best practices and turned them into games mechanics.
Ooh, okay. That's going to require a little work to kind of pull through some 90s stuff, but I'm down.
That's a great topic, though. So thank you, Chromatic Chameleon. All right.
That will not be a fast turnaround, though. That's going to require a little bit of research on our side. But I like it. I like that.
Ding.
That's a good. If this was our 300 level class, that would be a good term paper, Chromatic Chameleon. Mm-hmm. That would be a good term paper to turn in. Mm-hmm. All right. Cool. Welcome back. We're doing the roundtable part where we now just kind of talk about this topic in a little more free form. Yep. So I'm going to ask the first question.
All right.
Open to all of us. as a player in a game, and I will leave this. No, I'm going to leave this as exactly as I wrote it, not freeform here. As a player in a game, what is your approach to planning in games? Jer?
I will say I'm going to start with KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. I mean, what game doesn't need more kissing anyway?
I thought you were going to say you lick it up.
Yes. So, yeah, I guess that's one of their better songs. I like that one. But let's talk about, but seriously, when you get to the point where it's time to plan, keep it simple. Talk about what the goal is, ask the GM about the opposition, discuss how to get more info, ask the GM what mechanics exist in this game to help us prep the player, and then execute the plan. Don't waste time. And if you see other players that are dragging their heels or debating pointless minutia, the first thing to do is tell them about it. And number two, if the player group gets bogged down in planning and the GM doesn't seem to be looking at stopping them from planning, just start doing something. Go ahead and start the plan without them.
Just Leroy Jenkins, this bitch.
Well, a little, yes, but a little more organized than Leroy Jenkins. But they will adapt to the fly. When in doubt, be impulsive. I mean, if they're sitting there going around, well, I don't say, hold on a second, a GM, yeah. While they're busy here, I'm going to go out and gather some information at the bar. I'm going to go talk to, Dexter, the Four Arms diner cook, and ask him some questions about where this planet might be. And just go off and do that. And they'll adapt on the fly. And it'll give the GM something to do, first of all.
Yeah.
And worst case scenario, again, if you got another player who just doesn't seem to be able to get into the planning, drag them along with you. They might help you in your plan. But when in doubt, if you're the player and the rest of the party isn't getting to the point, be impulsive, take daring actions. But first, start by doing the basics. Talk about what the goal is, ask about the opposition, discuss how to get more info, ask the GM what mechanics exist. Go through those four first. That will often direct the rest of the players into a better, more organized planning session that you can get through quickly. And once again, nobody cares what the name of the mule is going to be. All right, Bob?
Yeah, so definitely try and keep a handle on anybody who's falling down the rabbit hole of overly detailed planning. When you see someone start to spiral, try and grab them and pull them out of it. You don't need to go into all of the excruciating details. It's folly. Focus on your high-level core concepts of the plan, the detailed steps. We need to do X, Y, and Z. And then if the game has mechanics for the rest of it, that's great. If they don't, sometimes you just got to say, let's just go with it and deal with the consequences or the problems that come up on the fly. And definitely, you got questions, ask your GM. The GM is likely to give you some information if you ask him. He may not sit there and go, oh, I'm just going to give you all this free stuff. But if you ask and say, hey, I'm going to check with so-and-so, what's the skinny? He'll give you the info. They will give you the info.
I thought of one last thing. I think the other thing to do, this is also a good chance as a player to bring in the other players on things. If you've got that one player who's always quiet, but has something that might be useful in the plan, if they don't venture forth, just ask them, hey, you have lockpicking too. Do you have any thoughts on how to do that? Or maybe you could help us with this. You might suddenly get a quick solution to the plan by the person who's been sitting there quietly waiting to ask a question. So just, all right.
What about you, Phil?
So for me, this is actually a case where I have to be very careful not to become the alpha gamer. Right? I mean, this is what I do for a living, right? Yeah. So as soon as I hear a group of people trying to figure out how to get something done, like I'm immediately like, let me assist you, right? Like, let me start molding this and, having this conversation, whatever. So I try really hard, especially even more so if I'm sitting with random people who don't know me, I will try very hard not to take over planning.
Yeah.
I will be very I will just mention a few things and then I'll kind of sit back or I'll make
especially
a suggestion.
If you have a type A personality, you may be sitting there going, oh, I want to be like, okay, look, I do this for a living, so this is how we should go about this.
Right. Allow me to be the asshole. So I do this for a living, right? And then just, that is exactly the person, like when you're sitting with a random table, that is exactly what you do not want to hear.
Everybody at the table rolls their eyes and goes, "Oh, here we go."
Yeah, as a professional project manager.
Ange made an interesting comment. She says, and honestly, what fun is it if you plan everything and it goes exactly as planned? I will say there's a small part of me that will get some satisfaction of, look at that. We did it. We made the plan. We executed the plan. Everything went well. Chef's kiss.
I think that it has a lot to do with the stakes of the game, right? Like, I would be much happier if my Blades in the Dark mission went according to, quote, plan as much as possible, because the cost and stress in Blades in the Dark for effing up badly is a lot.
Yeah, Blades is a little less forgiving than some of the
others. But but like in a Hydro Hacker game, like where the stakes are still pretty high, but with that system, you've got, a little more, you've got your 7 to 9s and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree with Ange, right? Like, there's something fun about there's something fun about dealing with the what goes wrong part of the game. But I think it also has a lot to do with the game. A game that's highly lethal, I am not going to find massive holes in my plan to be fun. In a game where I have a good chance of living through a thing, even if I have to spend some resources, then I'm more apt to let it fly. And I think genre is a big part of that, right? And this is probably going back to what do I do when playing a game is I also match up my advice for planning based on the game we're playing.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're playing like pulpy, dungeony, kind of, kick in the door, slay monster kind of thing.
Yeah.
We don't need much of a plan. Like, we just need to, who's covering the east door, who's covering the west door, who's running up to the altar. Let's go. Yep. If we're playing something more intricate like Knights Black Agents, and we're assaulting a vampire human trafficking ring, I want things a little more locked down.
Yeah.
Like, I want things to go a little bit more the way I thought and less than the other way. So I think it does. I think it does have a lot to do with the game you're playing, the genre you're emulating, that kind of thing. For instance, Heat is a movie where the final heist doesn't go quite as planned, and it doesn't. Right, and it doesn't go well for the quote players in that game.
Yeah.
It's one of the most amazing gunfight scenes in cinema, but there's a big difference between, for instance, John Wick 2, where the end of the job he gets screwed over, right? Yeah. Which he's going to get screwed over. Mm-hmm. He thinks he's got those guns in there because he thinks he's going to be chased out, and he's going to have to fight them as they're going through the tunnels. But he winds up, again, preparedness. He's got everything he needs to fight. In that game, I'd be less worried that, this unexpected wrinkle occurs because John Wick's gonna make it through this scene, right? He's gonna make it.
Remind me in the after show to talk about John Wick, in relation to another property.
Oh, I saw somebody post that. It's amusing. All right.
Next.
Cool. Question 2. Flip it around. Flip it around is, how do you handle planning? I forgot to color code this. Jerry was going to ask this question because I'm going to go first. But anyway.
Okay. Question 2. As a GM, how do you handle planning in games?
Yeah, I really try to avoid it as much as possible or limit it as much as possible. So one of the things, so obviously anything with mechanisms helps, immensely, right? If a game has mechanisms to handle planning, I want to use those. But even if it doesn't, especially if I'm running a tighter game like a con game, I'll just tell the players in very much a sprawl-like way. I will just tell players like, hey, here's what you need to figure out. How are you getting in? Who's planting the device? How are you getting out? What are you putting the water in? Right? I'll just put those 4 questions on the table. Now I've eliminated a whole mess of discussion, right? Like as soon as I put those on the table, people focus right in. How are we getting in? The player's like, oh, you know what? I think we can con our way in. Cool. Let's do a group action move to con our way in. Boom, that's off the list, right? How are we going to get, who's planting the device? Oh, it should be one of us who's got, who's got good stealth or good mechanics or whatever. Oh, that's probably me. I guess I'll do it. Oh, I'll back you up because I'm tight with you. We'll go together. Cool. Check. Boom. Off the list. I find that technique works really well is if you just tell them, hey, I need you to solve the following problems. Like come up. Your plan needs to just answer these questions. We'll play the rest. I think that works really well. And then again, if the game I'm playing has something like a flashback mechanic or something like that, then I'm also telling people, don't worry. You don't have to be as precise because you're going to be able to lean back on this mechanic, right? That's the whole idea with Blades in the Dark is like the whole reason you don't come up with the rest of the plan is that as shit unfolds, you just emulate it by like, oh, yeah. Spend a little stress. Of course, we have a barge waiting out underneath the window for us to jump into. Yeah. I made those arrangements earlier. That kind of thing. It's, and then you do a quick flashback. Oh, cool. Tell me how you set that up, right? Oh, yeah, I went to my friend, blah, blah, blah. And we play out this little scene. I like that. And again, if a game has a flashback mechanic, then I want you to plan even less because it's like, well, you don't really need to plan. You really need to just come up with cool flashbacks later to explain this. So yeah, that's my favorite, that's my preferred approach, regardless of game, is kind of the way I like to lean into it, is really that answer these questions for me and then let's get playing. How about you, Joe?
For me, right now, in games that don't have the mechanic, I like the mechanics that came out of the Savage Worlds Lankmar supplement. Basically modified, you give everybody 5 minutes to discuss the plan. That's it. What are you guys going to do? What are your objectives? How are you guys going to prepare for it? What are you guys thinking about? Then it's time for the montage. Everybody talks about what skill they're going to use to prepare for the mission. It could be anything from I'm going to go carousing in a bar. I'm going to use persuasion. I'm going to get into a fight. So I'm going to use fighting and impress people with how good I am at fighting. And then afterwards, I'll be able to talk to people and get some information. Whatever it is they want to do, let them role play that brief little segment. Just a minute or so for each one, and then have them make a skill check. For every success they get, and then for every raise or crit or 5 points over the difficulty, whatever you like, they get a heist token. So it's possible for one player to get multiple heist tokens if they roll really well or role play well. Put all those tokens inside their table, and then once the scheme goes into action, they start playing out their mission. And any player can take a heist token, either do a flashback and show how they plan for the situation they're having trouble with, or how they're going to get past this. This can mechanically result in them having the right equipment, or having the right information, or having the right contact to get past the obstacle, or just something that gives them an extra bonus to the roll. For example, when I was out carousing, I heard one of the guards owes a lot of money to the local crime lord, so we might be able to bribe him. And therefore, the players have the guard up ahead. They're going to talk their way into giving him money to let them pass, or something on that line. They're going to start out with that and come with what they're going to do with it. Or, my contact at the International House of Hackers, it's hackers with 2 Z's, gave me the password for the mainframes. When we get up there, we're going to be able to get in easy. We studied the receipts for the original building plans and saw the type of security system they installed. So we brought along the collapsible rods and mirrors that are going to foil the laser sensors. Whatever it is, they just play those tokens and everybody gets to participate. So the barbarian who's coming along, maybe he got some information that lets them get past that. He learned something important while he was out carousing with people. And everybody on their turn gets to do something to help overcome the obstacles. And if they get through without using them, that's fine. But if they need them, they've got them as a flashback mechanic, which I know games like Leverage still use. And I've seen players who have played this with me in Savage Worlds basically try to use this in other games that don't have it as well, like D&D 5e or Barbarians Lumber and things. And it works perfectly well in a lot of them. There are other game systems that have better mechanics built into them, but if they don't, this is the easiest way I found to use it. And it keeps your planning down to 5, basically plan for 5 minutes, role play for 5 or 10 minutes on how they get their information, and then jump into the plan. And 15 minutes after they decide they have to do something, they're doing it. And they don't need to know exactly what's coming up. We knew we needed a ladder. Here's a heist token. We brought a ladder along for that. Or,
of course I've got a lead anti-tank weapon in my duffel bag.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, you know
Who
what, we don't
doesn't?
know. I'm going to spend a heist token. We learned that there was a secret entrance in here. We don't know exactly where it is, but there's a way to get past that. What is it, And they work with you, and it becomes kind of like a reverse leading question and leads to a lot more role playing and a lot less dice rolling, which is always the fun part. So that's how I handle planning when the game doesn't have a mechanic for it. And it's worked really well for the last couple of years.
I mean, it's a fun system, right?
Yeah.
So it's first of all, I love montages. Bob, if you wouldn't mind putting in the pin list, I need to do a little research to see if there's enough in there to do a garage on the montage mechanic. But there are a couple games that do montages, and I love montage mechanics because it is very much a genre emulation, right? It's it's emulating what we see in a TV show.
Yep.
I love them. I love them to death. And I try to, even when I don't have them in my games, sometimes I like to just try to find a way to describe things in montages. So I don't know. It could be a workshop, might be a garage. I got to see how much there is to it because I might just be liking it more than there's meat on the bone.
There might be other things we can tie into it, though.
Yeah. I'm what you call it? I'm going to move us along quickly.
Yep.
Since we've taken a little while on this topic.
It's a good topic.
I think we'll just do this one really quick and just ask everybody to just kind of touch on this because I think we discussed them earlier. But question 3, when it comes to mechanisms for planning, what are some of the things that you like the most? Like, what are your mechanisms? What are your mechanisms like out of games where you're like, oh, I love using that. I love using that in a heist game or a planning.
Yeah, so I really love the flashback. That's my favorite thing. On the fly, you have an opportunity to explain how you already planned ahead for something that as a player, you had no idea what was going to happen. But you run into something and you're like, aha, flashback. Of course I hid this thing over here in the corner where I could get at it when this happened. Yes. See how smart I am? It's an opportunity to have a cool answer for a problem and highlight competence of characters and how smart they are.
I'm going to go right with Bob. I think the flashback mechanics is basic. I think it does a really good job of letting the players feel like their characters are smarter and more competent. They don't feel stupid when they're caught off guard. And it also focuses the adventure on more than just, oh, well, this isn't working, time to start killing everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to my favorite, the preparedness skill.
Yep.
I love the idea. It's similar to the flashback skill. Again, it's that thing that creates hyper competence, right? Because it looks like you accounted for this thing, like you knew what was going to happen all along, and I love that look. I love that, especially for games where that's a trope in the game. So it definitely is for nights,
especially with like a super spy type of thing, Jason Bourne.
Yeah,
oh, yeah. Jason
Bourne always got a plan, right?
Yeah.
Like that. Love Jason Bourne. All right. Anyway, all right, cool. That was our discussion. Our Redux on planning. I actually liked. If I went back and looked at the episode 173 notes, like they are nothing like what we talked about tonight.
I mean, think about what's come out since then.
Yeah.
Blades in the Dark, Sprawl.
Yeah.
Games that have mechanically influenced how you run a heist. Yeah.
I think nearly everything we mentioned tonight came out since 2015.
Yep.
Or pretty close. All right. Anyway, good. Next time, we hope that next time your group decides to come up with a plan, that you'll keep some of these things in mind. If there's any more questions from the chat room, we'll take them. And if not, we're off to the conversation corner.
I think we're good to go.
All right. Hit it.
Dun, 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 dun. All right.
Oh, can I tell you my Foghorn Leghorn story?
Yes, tell the Foghorn Leghorn story.
So I go to visit my parents in Connecticut after, a certain amount of negotiation for safety purposes and all that. We all agree we're going to, bubble up. Anyway, go to visit my parents. Great. One of our family friends is in Ireland. They've been on sabbatical in Ireland. They're coming back to the U.S. and they have to quarantine for 14 days. So my dad's like, hey, since you're here, can you and your son give me a hand getting their stuff out of the storage unit and put into their new apartment? Because they wound up getting an apartment like right around the, like down the road from my parents, which was awesome. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. So one of the things in the storage locker is our friend's car. And it's a hybrid, it's a Subaru crossover hybrid. And so it's been in there for like a year. Right. So of course it doesn't start. So my dad's like, so it's been in there for a year, and it's in with the hood facing the back of the storage unit.
Yeah, so it's not easy to get in there and give it a jump.
Correct. So my dad, I'm like, cool, Dad. I'm like, put it in neutral. Down, the boy and I will roll the car out into the open area, and we'll jump it using my car. So he's like, oh, I can't. And I'm like, you can't. He's like, I'm like, did you put the key in the thing? He's like, there's no key. Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh, all right. He's like, don't worry. He's like, I brought 2 pairs of jumper cables. We'll just wire it over the car and into the battery. And he starts heading for the trunk of my car to get the jumper cables. And I'm like, wait a second. I like open up YouTube and I'm like, Subaru crossover, neutral, battery dead. And sure enough, there's a video that's like, hey, so this doesn't happen very often, but if your Subaru crossover doesn't have any power and you need to put it in neutral, here are the steps you take. And I'm like, hey, Dad. I'm like, he's like, I say, boy, just hook up these.
Boy, I say, boy.
I say this as the Foghorn Leghorn story because I think I've said this on the show before. My dad, I love my dad, and we have a great relationship, but we are very much the Foghorn Leghorn and the little egghead kid.
Yeah.
So I show him very quickly that with a screwdriver, you can get the car back into neutral. So we were able to roll it out and jump it, the normal way, not have to connect jumper cables over the top of the car. And it was amusing. It was also stupid hot. Like we were moving, it was like 90 something degrees out. And then the whole thing's like asphalt and steel.
Yeah.
So I get in my car is like 106. And I'm like, you know what? I know that you're not accurate, but I kind of feel like it's 106 right now.
Yeah.
Like, anyway.
That's what we call stupid hot.
Oh, it was stupid hot. It was nice to see my parents. It is always it's not a challenge seeing my parents. The hard part for me is that it's not a vacation because I don't do the things that I like to do when I go to my parents' house. Like I didn't play Minecraft. I didn't hang out with you guys in the evening. I didn't watch Star Trek. Like I have my life structured where I kind of do those things a little bit at a time each day. And so like I kind of nourish myself in little bits along the way. So when I go to my parents' house, and again, I love seeing my parents, but I don't do those things. I do like other things. And I'm not a person who likes disruptions in routine and schedule. So it is always a tad more stressful for me. After a couple of days, I start to kind of get really itchy about like, what am I doing? Why I'm not doing anything. I'm just, I'm sitting here. We're doing, like I get kind of put out of sorts. So it was nice seeing him, had a lovely time, ate some great food, played a killer 5-person game of Ticket to Ride, which was just unbelievably brutal. As 4 of us made a run on the East Coast, which is a terrible way to play Ticket to Ride. It was a bloodbath of cards routes that people couldn't complete. And so we did all those fun things. But like I got home last night and I like sat down in front of my computers and I was like, it's my babies. Like my screens are up.
We're home.
Yeah. So yeah, that was like, and the other thing I did while I was there, the one thing I did manage to do was I started reading Numenera, and getting ready for our session 0 on Sunday. And this is a pretty easy system. Like when we did it here as the EP, it's a pretty easy system. I like reading through it and I'm like, it's not the mechanics of this game that we're going to be like it's not going to be the thing.
It's not a very heavy lift.
Nah. It's, I don't say that in a bad way. Like I'm looking at these mechanics. I'm like, these are very playable rules. Like this suits me. There's a couple things like I would like a little different in the Cypher system, but not by much. Yeah. Not enough to even want to hack it. I'm like, nah, I'll be happy to just play this as is. Like this will totally work. All right, I'll keep it short. That's me. How about you, Bob?
Yeah, so I carved out some time over the past week week and a half, probably the past week, and actually read a book. I read the latest Dresden Files novel.
Oh, yes.
So I completed a book. So I'm very happy about that. Now I have to pick another book and do the same thing again and continue to carve out reading time. With all the Trek that we've been watching, I decided to add a little Wars in. So I am watching the Clone Wars on Disney+. I had, back in the day, at some point in the past, I had watched the Clone Wars film and then started watching the series and got a couple episodes into it and then kind of trailed off. So now I'm like deeper. I'm like 9 or 10 episodes into it. Enjoying it so far. 7 seasons of 24 half-hour episodes. So it'll take me a little while to chug through it, but not going to be too terrible. But I'm enjoying it. The animation's interesting. And then after that, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna catch up with like Rebels and Resistance or whatever the other shows were, because I'm like way behind on my other Star Wars type featurey things or shows. I'm also looking forward to 23 weeks of new Trek coming up later this year. August something. August 6th or something like that, the animated show on CBS Online drops, Lower Decks.
Oh,
which
yeah,
is the
yeah.
humorous animated show about the people that are not the bridge crew that get all the fame and the glory. That looks like it's going to be a fun time. And there's X number of weeks of that. And then the week after that ends, season 3 of Discovery drops. So all told, there's going to be 23 weeks of brand new Trek. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. That's going to be fun. And one more quick note on Star Wars. For people like me who really enjoyed the movie Solo and didn't think it was a train wreck of epic proportions like Batman vs. Superman, Train Wreck of Justice, it's become kind of a cult favorite now, unless you're one of the whiny haters that hates all things Star Wars from the modern era.
Yeah.
People have been like, hey, it wasn't that bad. I would like to see more of this. There is a high likelihood that we are going to get a Disney Plus series of Solo and Lando and maybe some Darth Maul, like a continuation of the story. In Disney Plus series form. So I'm looking forward to the possibility of that happening.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
I like that.
I enjoyed that film. Okay.
I liked Solo plenty. And let me tell you that, one, I could just have a Lando film.
Oh, yeah.
Or Lando series. As long as they promise to every episode have a different cape. I'm not don't get me wrong. I'm not taking anything away from Lando, the actor, or anything, because I thought his portrayal of Lando was spot on. But I also think the capes, man, like the capes are badass. Like I want different patterns, colors. Like I want them all. Like, yeah. And then I want a cape.
Of course.
No capes.
Hey, Phil's not trying to be a superhero. Capes are perfectly fine.
Yeah. Correct. No capes for superheroes. Capes perfectly fine for badass space gambler.
There you go.
That's right.
Jerry, what about you?
Pretty much. Last week was, as I said, kind of a slow week. I did a lot of little Lego building, which was kind of my way to kind of de-stress, and a lot of fun Minecrafting. The Slack Room Minecraft server, especially this season where everybody's working together on the same village, has been a lot of fun. Every time you log on, there are new buildings being built in town, people coming up with new resources. So things that you hadn't thought about trying to play around with, all of a sudden you go there and, Rich has gone into the nether and has come back with a bunch of chorus fruit that we need to build capsules. We can go build some buildings, that kind of stuff. And Andy and Savannah have been getting into DecoCraft, which is a way in Minecraft to build super hyper detailed furniture and things. And so I'll build a building and tell them, I'm building this building and it's going to be the Fletcher's house. And so I just put some generic little things in there to kind of represent where chairs and tables are supposed to be. And then I log on again, and now the whole place is decked out to the nines. And it's a lot of fun. So it's not just sometimes it's fun just to log on and spend a half an hour just running around to look at all the cool things everybody else did.
Yeah, Phil, you're not going to recognize the place. When
oh
you
my
log
God,
on again.
you are not going to be.
I know, right? I've been gone for a week.
And it's a lot of fun, and we've done a lot of teamwork things, and it's some of the things that kind of happened tangentially in earlier seasons of our Minecraft game. Because after we played Minecraft to the point where we kind of reached the end game, we started a new season over. But some things that happen kind of tangentially, where once in a while somebody's like, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and someone would show up and help them. Now it's somebody's in the middle of doing a project, and everybody else runs over to look at it, and somebody's like, "Oh, I've got to clear this whole hill and knock it down and then replace it with dirt." Well, sometimes you have 3 people working on that project, so instead of it being one person's half-hour project, it becomes 10 minutes of everybody telling jokes, and all of a sudden it's done and they can work on their project again. And knowing what somebody else wants to do, like that Andy wants to build more buildings. If I'm just sitting watching an episode of Trek, I'll sit there and level a hill and make it even so somebody else can build there. And just had a lot of fun. It's been everything that I wanted on Minecraft again. So it's been
nice.
good.
It's been a good time.
All right. So Patreon shout outs.
Let's do it.
Yes, and we have one of Phil's favorites.
Oh, I'm prepared. Thank you.
All right.
I noticed it in the formatting.
Tonight we are going to shout out to Mirko Frolik, Adrian Herman, Andrew Demps, Brantley Harris,
Chris Steele,
Curtis Y. Takahashi, Danielle Thomas, Derek Broughton, J. David Chrisman, and J.T. Evans. Thank you for being patrons of the show, and thanks to everyone for listening tonight.
If you are free on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. the Queen's time, come join us live on Twitch, where you can chat with other listeners in the awesome chat room for life and ask us the occasional question.
And if you cannot make it to the live show, check out our podcast each week, wherever you get your podcasts. And take a listen to some of the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, such as Down with D&D, Bone, Stone, and Obsidian, the FM Gamers, Panda's Talking Games, the Gnomecast, John Who Hustle, She's a Super Geek, and Bonus Experience. You can and should also check out our sibling podcasts, Tabletop Bellhop, The Knights of the Night, and the always amazing Gaming and BS.
After you have planned your approach, but before you bog down into contingencies that make everyone want to pound their faces into the table, leave us some feedback. You can reach us directly via email, mmp@misdirectedmark.com, or hit us up on Twitter. The show and the network is @misdirectedmark. He's Robert M. Everson. He's GM Gerrymander, and I am DNA Phil.
If you like what we do here and on the other shows in the Misdirected Mark Network, you can support our Patreon campaigns. MMP, Down with D&D, and Panda's Talking Games are at patreon.com/MMP. She's a Super Geek is at patreon.com/SassGeek. Zhangu Hustle is at patreon.com/Zhangu Hustle, and Bonus Experience is at patreon.com/Bonus Experience. Patrons of MMP, Down with D&D, and Panda's Talking Games get access to the after show, pre-production show notes, musical parodies, the Panda's Talking Games bonus outtakes, and other special releases.
This has been a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Mic drop.
We out.